What if the child standing beside her mother is the only person in the hospital telling the truth? The private elevator doors were already sliding shut when the little girl grabbed the doctor's sleeve. A faded hospital wristband slipped from beneath the cuff of her oversized gray hoodie, flashing a name that nobody else noticed. At the far end of the marble hallway, Vincent Moretti stopped mid-step. The billionaire crime boss did not hear her voice. He read her lips. "She's not my mother." Dr. Richard Hale immediately placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and forced a reassuring smile. "Emily's confused," he said calmly. "She's been through a lot." But the girl never looked at the woman beside her. She kept staring at the doctor. Then she mouthed 5 more words. "Please don't let me go." 3 hours earlier, St. Catherine Medical Center looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. Sunlight spilled through towering glass walls. Fresh flowers sat on polished stone tables. Wealthy donors moved through the lobby with coffee cups and expensive watches. Vincent Moretti hated the place. Not because it was beautiful, because hospitals reminded him of promises that arrived too late. He stepped from a private SUV flanked by 2 security men and entered through a side entrance reserved for board members and major benefactors. Officially, he was there to discuss a charitable expansion project. Unofficially, he was avoiding another afternoon alone in a mansion that had become far too quiet over the years. As he crossed the executive wing, a small detail caught his attention. One of the framed donor plaques had been removed from the wall. The brass hooks remained. A rectangular patch of unfaded paint marked where it had hung for years. Strange. Hospitals rarely removed donor names. They usually added more. Vincent slowed for half a second before continuing. It should have meant nothing. Yet something about the empty space lingered in his mind. Half an hour later, he saw the girl for the first time. She sat alone near a window overlooking the city. Her sneakers were worn. Her hoodie sleeves hung past her fingertips. A coloring book rested open on her lap. But she wasn't coloring. She was watching every nurse who passed, watching every doctor who entered the corridor, watching the elevators, not like a bored child, like someone counting exits. A woman approached carrying a designer handbag and wearing a smile polished enough for television cameras. "There you are, sweetheart," she said. The girl's shoulders immediately tightened. Not dramatically, just enough. Most people would have missed it. Vincent did not. The woman reached to brush a strand of hair from the girl's face. Emily leaned away by less than an inch. Again, most people would never notice. Vincent did. "We'll be going home soon," the woman said warmly. Emily lowered her eyes and said nothing. The silence lasted too long. Then Dr. Hale appeared. His white coat was immaculate. His smile was practiced. His voice carried the confidence of a man accustomed to being trusted. "Everything's ready," he told the woman. "The discharge paperwork is complete." The woman visibly relaxed. Too much, as if she had been waiting for those exact words. Vincent looked away. None of this was his business. Children were discharged every day. Families reunited every day. But as he continued toward the boardroom, he noticed one final detail reflected in the dark glass of a nearby window. The little girl had slipped her hand beneath her sleeve and wrapped her fingers tightly around something hidden underneath. Not a toy, not a stuffed animal. Something small, something she refused to let go of. And when the sleeve shifted for a fraction of a second, Vincent caught a glimpse of faded white plastic circling her wrist. A hospital identification band so old that the printed name had nearly disappeared, except for one word that remained strangely clear. Rebecca. Rebecca. The name lingered in Vincent Moretti's mind long after the girl disappeared around the corner with the woman and Dr. Hale. He had seen thousands of names attached to contracts, shipping manifests, court filings, and donation plaques. Most vanished the moment he looked away. This one did not. Maybe it was because the hospital bracelet looked too old to still be on a child's wrist. Maybe it was because of the way Emily had hidden it beneath her sleeve the moment she noticed adults watching. Or maybe it was because every instinct he had spent decades developing was quietly telling him that something inside this building did not fit. The board meeting lasted 42 minutes. Vincent remembered because he checked his watch 3 separate times. Executives discussed funding projections. Architects presented glossy renderings of a new pediatric wing. Lawyers reviewed liability language. Vincent heard almost none of it. He found himself staring through the glass wall overlooking the executive corridor. Twice he saw Dr. Hale pass by, the first time alone, the second time with Claire Whitman. Both times they appeared calm, professional, normal. Yet when Claire handed Hale a paper coffee cup, Vincent noticed something strange. 2 cups, same order sticker, same timestamp, purchased 20 minutes before Claire had supposedly arrived at the hospital. An insignificant detail, until it wasn't. After the meeting ended, Vincent wandered the corridor under the excuse of taking a phone call. A nurse pushed a supply cart past him. Visitors moved between rooms carrying balloons and flowers. For a moment the hospital seemed exactly what it claimed to be. Then he saw Emily again. She sat at a small table near a children's activity corner, carefully folding a napkin into perfect squares. Claire stood several feet away speaking on her phone. Dr. Hale was nowhere in sight. Vincent watched from a distance. Emily unfolded the napkin, wrote something, folded it again, then slipped it into the pocket of her hoodie. Not the behavior of a distracted child. The behavior of someone hiding information. As Claire approached, Emily immediately stood up and zipped her pocket shut. Claire smiled. Emily did not smile back. A few minutes later, Vincent found himself near the pediatric records desk. Not because he intended to investigate. At least that was what he told himself. The clerk behind the counter recognized him immediately and offered assistance. Vincent declined. Then his eyes landed on a monitor displaying patient movement logs. Names, times, room transfers. One entry caught his attention before. The screen refreshed. Emily Sawyer. Transfer approved. Discharge scheduled. Destination field blank. Vincent frowned. Most discharge records listed a home address, care facility, or legal guardian. This one listed nothing. The screen changed before he could read more. He continued walking, yet the unease followed him. Late that afternoon, a security officer stopped near the nurse's station and complained about a technical issue. Vincent barely listened until he heard the words missing footage. Apparently, one hallway camera had lost exactly 11 minutes of recording the previous evening. Not hours, not days, 11 minutes. Long enough for someone to move unnoticed between departments. Short enough to avoid attention. The officer laughed it off. Technology failed all the time. Vincent nodded and kept walking. But later, when he passed the same hallway, he noticed something else. Emily standing beneath the camera, looking directly at it, then looking at him. Slowly, she raised her hand and tapped 2 fingers against her wrist, where the old hospital bracelet rested beneath her sleeve. Once, twice. Then she pointed toward the camera. She never said a word. That night, as Vincent prepared to leave, his phone buzzed with a routine security report from one of his men stationed in the parking structure. Attached was a photograph taken accidentally during a vehicle inspection. Claire Whitman was loading bags into her car. Ordinary enough, except for one detail visible through the windshield. Hanging from the rearview mirror was a hospital employee key card with Dr. Richard Hale's name printed across it. The photograph stayed on Vincent Moretti's phone long after he left the parking structure. Dr. Hale's employee key card hanging from Claire Whitman's rearview mirror could have been explained away a dozen different ways. A misplaced badge. A favor. An accident. The problem was that Vincent had spent most of his life around people who survived by inventing explanations. Real truth rarely arrived with explanations. It arrived with patterns. And patterns were beginning to form. The next morning, St. Catherine Medical Center smelled faintly of coffee, disinfectant, and fresh paint. Vincent arrived before sunrise. Officially, he was there for another meeting. Unofficially, he wanted answers before Emily disappeared from the building. He found her in the same activity corner near the windows. The coloring book was gone. In its place sat a small paper cup of orange juice and a stack of puzzle cards. Emily was arranging the cards by color instead of picture. Blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow. She looked up when Vincent approached. Neither smiled. For several seconds, they simply watched each other. Then Emily slid one card across the table. On the back, written in careful pencil, were 4 numbers. 714. Vincent frowned. What is that? Emily glanced toward the nurse's station, then toward the elevators. Finally, she pointed at the number again. Before she could explain, Claire appeared carrying a shopping bag from the hospital gift store. There you are, she said brightly. Her voice was warm, too warm, like someone performing warmth instead of feeling it. She placed a stuffed bear on the table. Emily never touched it. I bought this for you. Emily looked at the bear, then at Claire. Then she slowly pushed it away. For the briefest moment, Claire's smile slipped. Less than a second. But Vincent saw it. The smile returned immediately. She's having one of her difficult mornings, Claire said softly. The doctors warned me this might happen. Vincent nodded without agreeing. Emily reached into her hoodie pocket. Claire's eyes moved there instantly. Tiny reaction. Fast. Nervous. Then gone. Later that morning, Vincent found himself near the pediatric records office again. A maintenance worker was repairing a printer beside the reception desk. No one paid attention to him. Vincent casually glanced at a scheduling screen reflected in the glass partition. Emily Sawyer. Observation review. 7:14 a.m. yesterday. The same number written on the puzzle card. His attention sharpened. A clerk noticed him looking and quickly changed screens. Privacy regulations, she said apologetically. Vincent smiled and moved on. But now he knew the number was a time. Not a code. Not random. A time Emily wanted him to notice. Just after lunch, he passed the activity corner again. Emily was alone. She pulled a folded receipt from her pocket and slid it across the table. It was crumpled and stained. Hospital cafeteria. 2 coffees. 1 blueberry muffin. Timestamp. 7:14 a.m. The day before. Vincent stared. On the back, written in blue ink, was the name Richard Hale. Emily tapped the receipt, then pointed toward Claire's handbag sitting across the room. You found this? Vincent asked quietly. Emily nodded. Then she touched her own chest and shook her head. Not mine. She pointed toward Claire again. Not hers. Then she pointed toward the doctor's wing. The receipt belonged to Hale. At that exact moment, Dr. Hale entered the corridor. His eyes landed on the receipt in Vincent's hand. He stopped walking, just for an instant. Then he smiled and continued forward. Interesting keepsake, he said lightly, but his voice had changed. And for the first time since Vincent met him, the doctor never once looked Emily in the eye. Because printed beneath the cafeteria timestamp was something even stranger than the coffees. The receipt showed it had been paid for using an employee key card ending in 4427, the exact same 4 digits printed beneath Dr. Hale's missing hospital badge. The receipt remained on the table long after Dr. Hale walked away. Vincent folded it once and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not confront anyone. Not yet. Men who survived as long as he had learned that the first person to speak usually lost the advantage. Across the room, Emily sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap. The old hospital bracelet had disappeared beneath her sleeve again. It looked less like jewelry and more like something she was protecting from the world. An hour later, a meeting was arranged in one of St. Catherine's executive conference rooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. A polished walnut table stretched nearly 20 feet through the center of the room. Attorneys, administrators, and child welfare representatives occupied leather chairs. Emily was the smallest person there by nearly 3 feet. Claire sat beside her with one arm draped carefully over the back of her chair, performing concern for everyone in the room. Dr. Hale sat across from them. His expression was composed, professional, untroubled. We understand there has been some confusion, said a hospital attorney. Her tone was polite. But all legal documentation confirms Ms. Whitman's guardianship. Several heads nodded. Another administrator adjusted her glasses and added, Children experiencing trauma sometimes create alternate memories. It's more common than people realize. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody sounded cruel. That somehow made it worse. Emily listened as adults discussed her life as though she were not sitting 6 feet away. A social worker smiled gently. The safest thing is stability. A board member agreed. Constant questioning can be harmful. Claire lowered her eyes at exactly the right moment, looking wounded but dignified. Vincent watched the room slowly close around the child. Every statement sounded reasonable. Every explanation sounded responsible. Together they formed a wall. Emily's fingers tightened beneath the table. Not around Claire's hand. Around the hospital bracelet. The attorney finally turned toward her. "Emily, do you understand that Claire loves you?" Emily looked at her. Then she looked at Claire. The room waited. "She knows my favorite color," Claire said softly. "She knows what foods I like." Emily remained silent. "She takes care of me," Claire continued. "She brings me presents." Still silence. The board members seemed relieved. A quiet child was easier than a difficult one. Then Emily spoke. Her voice was small, clear. "What was my birthday song?" The room froze for half a second. Claire blinked. "Your birthday song?" "The one my mom sang every year." Claire smiled uncertainly. "Honey, I sang lots of songs." Emily shook her head once. "No," the silence deepened. "Just one." Claire glanced toward Dr. Hale. Only for an instant. Most people missed it. Vincent did not. Hale immediately leaned forward. "Emily, memory can be complicated. What was the song?" Emily repeated. Nobody answered. The little girl lowered her eyes and carefully placed something on the conference table. The faded hospital bracelet, the white plastic, looked painfully out of place against the polished wood worth thousands of dollars. Nobody touched it. Nobody wanted to. "My mom wrote the song on the back of my hospital picture," Emily said quietly. "If she's my mom, she knows it." Claire's smile faltered. One of the administrators cleared his throat. The attorney quickly redirected the conversation. "This is becoming emotional rather than factual." The meeting ended shortly afterward. Chairs moved. Papers were gathered. Adults congratulated themselves for remaining calm and professional. Claire appeared relieved. Dr. Hale appeared relieved. They believed control had returned. But as Vincent rose from his seat, he noticed a document partially exposed from the folder Hale had closed too quickly. Just one page. Just one line. Yet it was enough. Across the top of the form was Emily's discharge authorization dated yesterday morning. Beneath it was Dr. Hale's signature. And beneath the signature was a witness line already signed by Claire Whitman. More than 3 hours before hospital records showed she had even entered the building. Vincent did not mention the signature. Not to the attorney. Not to the board members. Not even to the 2 men who had worked security for him long enough to notice when something was bothering him. He simply memorized the page, memorized the timestamp, and walked away carrying the uncomfortable feeling that someone inside St. Catherine was rushing a process that should never have been rushed. Outside the conference room, the executive corridor had emptied. Afternoon sunlight stretched across the polished floor. Emily was sitting alone on a bench beneath a row of family photographs donated by former patients. Her feet barely touched the ground. The hospital bracelet rested in her lap. She was turning it slowly between her fingers, as if it were the most valuable thing she owned. Vincent stopped in front of her. Neither spoke immediately. Then Emily reached into the front pocket of her hoodie. Not quickly, not dramatically, carefully, like someone retrieving something fragile. She pulled out a photograph folded into quarters. The edges were soft from years of handling. "You kept this?" Vincent asked. Emily nodded. The photograph showed a young woman sitting in a hospital bed, holding a newborn wrapped in a pale pink blanket. The image had faded with time. Creases cut across the woman's face. Yet one thing remained clear. She was not Claire Whitman. Vincent looked longer than he intended to. Emily touched the woman's image with one finger. "Rebecca," she said quietly. It was the first time he had heard her say the name out loud. Vincent studied the photograph again. Something felt strange. Not the woman, the picture itself. Near the left edge, the background seemed uneven, almost torn. He angled it toward the light. A second figure had once been visible beside the hospital bed. Someone had been deliberately cut out. "Who was standing here?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Mom never told me." Before Vincent could ask another question, Emily reached into her pocket again. This time she removed something smaller. A plastic hospital identification tag attached to a faded string. It looked older than the bracelet. The printing was partially worn away. She placed it in his hand. "Mom said keep both together." Vincent turned the tag over. His eyes settled on the admission number, then on the date. He froze. The date matched the day Emily was born, but the hospital wing listed on the tag no longer existed. St. Catherine had closed that maternity unit nearly a decade earlier. Yet according to Emily's current records, she had supposedly been born somewhere else entirely. Vincent said nothing. Across the lobby, Claire appeared near the elevators. The moment she spotted the photograph in Vincent's hand, her expression changed. Only slightly. Her smile arrived a second too late. "Emily," she called warmly. "There you are." Emily immediately closed her fingers around the bracelet again. Claire approached. "Oh," she said, noticing the photograph. "That old thing." Her laugh sounded rehearsed. "She finds random keepsakes and gets attached to them." Vincent watched her carefully. "Random?" Claire nodded. "Children invent stories when they don't remember their early years." Emily lowered her eyes. Then she said something so quietly that Claire almost missed. "I remember the song." Claire's smile held. Barely. Vincent looked from the child to the woman, then back to the photograph. The cut edge. The missing person. The hospital tag. The false birth records. Pieces that should not fit together were beginning to fit too well. And as Claire reached toward the photograph, Vincent noticed her gaze never went to Rebecca's face. It went directly to the section where someone had been cut out. Claire's hand stopped halfway to the photograph when Vincent calmly folded it and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The movement was polite, unremarkable. Yet something in Claire's eyes hardened for a fraction of a second before the smile returned. Emily noticed it. Vincent noticed that Emily noticed it. Neither said a word. That evening, rain tapped softly against the tall windows of Vincent Moretti's penthouse. The city below glowed through the weather like blurred gold. A glass of untouched bourbon sat beside him. Across the room, his private attorney, Michael Keene, opened a secure laptop. "No police. No accusations. Just questions. Run everything on Richard Hale," Vincent said. "Employment history, board memberships, disciplinary reviews. Anything buried." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Hospital issue?" Vincent looked toward the rain. "Maybe." The search began quietly, the kind of quiet investigation that left no footprints. Personnel records, archived newsletters, foundation reports, access logs. For nearly an hour, nothing appeared unusual. Then Michael stopped scrolling. "That's strange." Vincent looked up. A charity foundation connected to St. Catherine had dissolved 8 years earlier. Officially, it funded emergency care for children. Unofficially, nobody seemed able to explain where its remaining assets had gone. One signature appeared repeatedly on financial approvals.
Richard Hale.
Vincent leaned back without speaking. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat alone in a pediatric room illuminated by the pale blue light of a television nobody was watching. The old hospital bracelet rested beside her on the blanket. A nurse had offered her snacks, toys, even a tablet. She accepted none of them. Instead, she carefully unfolded the photograph again. Rebecca's face, the missing figure cut from the edge, the hospital tag. She traced them with her finger. When a volunteer entered and cheerfully told her that wealthy people could solve almost anything, Emily shook her head. "I don't want money." The volunteer smiled gently. "Then what do you want?" Emily stared at the photograph. "I want them to stop lying." Hours later, Michael called again. Vincent answered on the first ring. The attorney sounded different now. More cautious. You need to see this. A file arrived seconds later. Archived employee access records from St. Catherine. Most entries were routine. Staff entering departments. Leaving departments. Shift changes. But one pattern repeated dozens of times over several years. Richard Hale's badge entering restricted records storage after midnight. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. Almost always within 24 hours of custody transfers involving minors. Vincent stared at the screen. Rain continued ticking softly against the glass. Something cold settled in his chest. There's more, Michael said. One employee filed an internal complaint 6 years ago. Vincent opened the attachment. The complaint had been dismissed. The employee resigned shortly afterward. The name made him sit forward. Rebecca Sawyer. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the rain and the faint hum of city traffic 40 floors below. Vincent reread the document. Rebecca had reported irregularities involving pediatric records, missing files, altered guardianship information, unauthorized access. The investigation concluded there was insufficient evidence. Case closed. Vincent looked at the date. 3 months later, Rebecca disappeared from all hospital employment records entirely. No termination report. No transfer. Nothing. Just gone. His eyes drifted back to the old photograph in his mind. The cutout figure. The missing mother. The frightened child. Then to the signature he had trusted every time he walked through St. Catherine's doors over the last decade.
Richard Hale.
And for the first time, Vincent realized he might have spent years believing the wrong man was protecting those children. Vincent did not sleep much that night. By sunrise, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean beneath a pale gray sky. He stood in a private conference room overlooking Lake Michigan while Michael Keene arranged a thin stack of documents across the table. No dramatica questions. No emergency meetings. Just pieces. Small pieces. The kind that became dangerous when placed in the correct order. By mid-morning, Vincent returned to St. Catherine. Emily was sitting near a window, tracing circles on a paper napkin with a dull pencil. She looked up when she saw him. "Do you remember the day your mother gave you the bracelet?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. "What else did she give you?" For a moment she said nothing. Then she pointed toward the photograph still folded in his jacket pocket. "The picture." Vincent waited. Emily shook her head. "Not the picture." She tapped twice against her temple. "The thing," she said. Vincent leaned slightly closer. "What thing?" Emily lowered her voice. "She said if someone asks about room 214, they're lying." Vincent's expression did not change. Inside, something tightened. Room 214. Such a simple detail. Yet children rarely invented details that specific. An hour later, Vincent arranged a small meeting. Nothing official. Just Dr. Hale, Claire, a hospital administrator, and himself. Coffee sat untouched in paper cups. A wall-mounted television displayed financial projections no one was reading. A security camera blinked quietly in the corner. Vincent began with harmless questions. Funding, staffing, expansion plans.
Hale ansvaret smoothly.
Claire relaxed. The administrator checked emails beneath the table. Then Vincent casually glanced at a floor map hanging on the wall. "By the way," he said, "I was reviewing old maternity wing records. Whatever happened to room 214? Silence. Tiny. Barely noticeable. Yet it existed." Hale reached for his coffee but never lifted it. "That room," he said. "Storage, mostly." Vincent nodded. "Always. As far as I remember." Claire stared at the table. Vincent said nothing else. The conversation moved on. 10 minutes later, it ended. Everyone stood. Chairs slid backward. Papers were gathered. Hale appeared calm again. Almost. Outside the room, Michael handed Vincent a sealed envelope. Inside were archived blueprints obtained that morning. Vincent studied them without speaking. Room 214 had never been storage. It had been a secure family consultation suite connected directly to pediatric records. Closed 8 years ago. The same year Rebecca Sawyer vanished. That afternoon, Vincent and Emily sat together in the hospital cafeteria. The lunch crowd had thinned. Sunlight reflected off stainless steel counters. Emily pushed French fries around her tray without eating them. "How did you remember the room number?" Vincent asked. Emily looked toward the windows. "Mom used to make me repeat it." "Why?" "Because she said numbers don't lie." Vincent stared at her for a long moment. Across the cafeteria, Dr. Hale appeared near the exit. He noticed them immediately. Then something unexpected happened. His phone rang. Hale looked at the screen and froze. Not long. 1 second. Maybe less. But instead of answering, he turned the phone face down and walked away. Emily watched him leave. "That's the ringtone," she said quietly. Vincent looked at her. "What ringtone?" Emily's fingers tightened around the hospital bracelet. "The one I heard outside room 214 the night my mom disappeared." At that exact moment, Michael's phone vibrated on the table. A new file had finished downloading from the hospital archive server. The file name contained only 3 words: Rebecca Sawyer complaint. And for the first time, Dr. Hale glanced back over his shoulder and saw Vincent standing beside Emily. The doctor did not look frightened. Not yet. But he finally looked like a man who understood the child was no longer alone.